Let me paint a rather familiar picture for you. You wake up, the alarm is blaring, you hit snooze a couple of times, and when you finally drag yourself out from under the covers, you just feel completely exhausted.
Oh yeah, that heavy feeling in your bones.
Exactly. Your bones feel heavy, your brain is foggy, and you're already, counting down the hours until you can crawl right back into bed tonight.
It's a universal feeling at this point.
It really is. And if that sounds anything like your morning today, you are absolutely not alone. Recent surveys actually show that the average adult in the U.S. feels tired for 3 whole days out of the week.
3 days. That is almost half the week just spent running on fumes.
Running on empty, yeah. And it gets deeper than just feeling sluggish. Somewhere between 30 and 48% of adults report having actual, persistent trouble sleeping. We're essentially functioning as a chronically tired society.
We really are. And it's something almost all of us battle at one point or another. The cultural conversation around sleep has never been louder. Yet, ironically, we seem worse at it than ever.
And the wild thing we're discovering is that the core of the problem for a lot of us might not actually be the literal mechanics of how much sleep we're getting.
Right. It's the anxiety.
The insidious issue is the anxiety surrounding our sleep. We're so incredibly stressed about not sleeping correctly that we literally cannot sleep.
We lie awake worrying about being awake.
Yes. So for today's deep dive, we're tackling this head on. We're pulling from a fantastic breakdown by Ali Abdaal, featuring his in-depth interview with Professor Russell Foster.
Who is phenomenal, by the way. He runs his own sleep lab at the University of Oxford.
Oxford, right. So
Yeah.
he's looking at the hard data every single day. And our mission today is to rescue you from that vicious cycle of sleep anxiety by systematically dismantling the massive sleep myths that are secretly ruining your rest.
It's a crucial mission because that anxiety doesn't just, materialize out of thin air. We really have to examine why we're so fixated in the first place.
Where does it come from?
Well, you see a lot of incredibly well-meaning advice out there that has inadvertently created a culture of sleep perfectionism.
Like the panic around 8 hours.
Exactly. Take Matthew Walker's highly acclaimed book, Why We Sleep. It's a fascinating piece of work, but it inadvertently sparked this massive public panic. People absorbed the information and started thinking they absolutely must hit this magical 8-hour mark every single night.
Or else?
Right, or else they're guaranteed to develop Alzheimer's disease or suffer a catastrophic cardiovascular event.
That mathematical panic just feeds the beast. You end up lying there staring at the ceiling, calculating the hours.
Doing the sleep math.
The dreaded sleep math. You tell yourself, if I manage to fall asleep right this very second, I'll get exactly 6 hours and 14 minutes. And that pressure just floods your system with adrenaline.
Which is the exact opposite of what your brain needs to transition into a state of rest. You're lying in bed feeling scared, worried, and deeply concerned about your health.
You're fully in fight or flight mode.
Totally. Paradoxically, that specific worry spikes your cortisol and stress levels, completely overriding your natural sleep drive. You render yourself entirely unable to fall asleep simply because you're trying so hard to do it. It's a terrible self-perpetuating loop.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to actually break that cycle, we need to completely debunk the 7 massive myths that Professor Foster highlighted in the source material.
Let's do it.
Let's start with the biology of timing and light. Myth number 1 is this idea that it doesn't matter when you sleep as long as you eventually sleep enough.
Yes. The hustle culture favorite.
We hear this a lot from hustle culture proponents or people trying to justify erratic hours. But the timing is actually critical because of how our circadian rhythm functions.
Right. The circadian rhythm is essentially your body's master internal clock. It's constantly ticking away in the background, signaling to your entire system what you need at any given time.
When to digest, when to be alert, when to rest.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is a major discovery made by Professor Foster and his research group back in the 1990s. They discovered that there's actually a specific group of cells in our eyes that have absolutely nothing to do with helping us see images or shapes.
Wait, cells in the eye that don't see.
Yep. Their entirely unique, dedicated job is just to detect light levels in our environment.
Which is a wild evolutionary quirk when you think about it. We actually have cells in our eyes that bypass vision entirely just to act as biological light meters for the brain.
Precisely. This localized light detection mechanism tells the master clock in our brain what time of day it is, regulating our entire internal rhythm. Because this clock is so incredibly sensitive to light, human biology absolutely demands that we're generally awake when it's bright outside and asleep when it's dark.
It's hardwired.
It's hardwired into our species. We can't just ignore that programming with a few cups of coffee.
And that hardwired programming brings up a pretty grim reality for people who are forced to fight their biology, like shift workers.
It's a huge issue. Professor Foster's group has looked deeply into what happens when the circadian rhythm is severely disrupted over long periods. Think constant jet lag or working the night shift for years.
And what do they find? Because the assumption is usually that you just get used to it eventually, right?
That is the assumption, but the findings there are quite alarming. They found that an astounding 97% of night shift workers never actually adapt to the biological demands of working at night.
97%, so almost no one adapts.
Almost no one, 97%. They're spending their entire careers fighting a biological system that is constantly screaming at them to go to sleep.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. And because they're caught in this perpetual biological tug of war, they experience a chronic increase in stress hormones. That leads to a significantly higher risk of heart disease, compromised immune systems where they get sick much more often, and a greater susceptibility to emotional and cognitive problems.
It's an immense toll on the body. But even for those of us who aren't working night shifts, our internal clocks aren't set to the exact same default. We have to factor in chronotypes.
Right.
Whether you're naturally a morning lark, a night owl, or somewhere in between.
We all have that internal clock, but you're right, they don't all start at the same time. Scientists bucket us into these chronotypes based on our natural genetic inclination to sleep during a certain window.
So it's genetic?
Very much so. If you naturally pop out of bed early without much effort and find that the morning hours are your absolute most productive time of the day, you likely have a morning chronotype.
Ollie shared a really relatable story about this in source material. He mentioned that he personally tried extremely hard to become that stereotypical morning person we see glorified all over social media.
The 5 a.m. club.
The 5 a.m. club.
Yeah.
He attempted to force himself to wake up at 6 in the morning and go straight to the gym, but he admitted it felt like an absolute nightmare every single time. He was miserable, and his workouts suffered.
Because he was trying to muscle through his natural chronotype instead of working with it.
Yeah, he eventually realized he's more of a middle-of-the-day kind of guy, so now he wakes up at a much more natural 7 or 7:30. He tackles his highest focus activities like deep work on his book in the late morning, and then shifts to lower energy, chill tasks in the evening.
That makes perfect sense for him.
And that's a massive takeaway for you listening. Once you figure out your chronotype, you want to try to organize your life around it as much as your schedule allows. Align your most creative, intense tasks with your natural biological window.
If you're a night owl and you have control over your schedule, lean into it. Do your focused work at night. There's no biological gold medal for waking up at 5 a.m. if your body hates every second of it.
Exactly. It fundamentally comes down to working alongside your biology rather than treating your body like an obstacle you have to overcome.
Well said.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's transition to myth number 4, which claims that blue light is the ultimate enemy of sleep.
Oh boy. The blue light myth.
We've built an entire multi-million-dollar industry around this sphere. We buy the specialized blue light blocking glasses. Ollie even mentioned paying an extra £100 at his optician just to have a blue light filter added to his prescription lenses.
Just to be safe.
Yeah, because he was convinced it was the only way to save his sleep hygiene.
It's a brilliant piece of marketing that took a very small kernel of scientific truth and blew it entirely out of proportion.
So what's the actual science behind it?
The underlying theory does sound logical on paper. Blue light has a short wavelength. Short wavelengths carry more energy. And therefore, scientists originally hypothesized that this specific type of light reacts intensely with the eye, suppressing melatonin and keeping us wide awake.
Okay, that makes sense in a lab setting.
Yeah.
But when researchers actually tested this in the real world, the data painted a vastly different picture.
Extremely different. Let's examine a major study conducted by a group at Harvard. They wanted to test the absolute worst-case scenario for screen time.
How bad are we talking?
They had participants look at a Kindle with its blue light-emitting backlight turned all the way up to maximum brightness for 4 straight hours right before bedtime.
4 hours of max brightness.
Yes. And they didn't just do this once. They had them repeat this for 5 consecutive nights.
Based on how the wellness industry talks about screens, you'd assume these participants suffered total insomnia.
You would think so. But what did the researchers actually find after putting them through that? Staring at that intensely bright blue light screen for 4 hours only delayed the onset of their sleep by about 10 minutes.
10 minutes, that's it.
That's it. Now, you have to understand that in the realm of scientific research, that 10 minutes is technically classified as statistically significant.
Meaning the data clearly shows a measurable effect occurred.
Right. But as Professor Foster points out, a 10-minute delay is, for all intents and purposes, biologically meaningless to your overall health and rest.
So it's real, but it doesn't matter.
Exactly. It's simply not the devastating, sleep-destroying monster it's been made out to be in pop culture.
Which is such a massive relief. You can finally read your backlit Kindle in bed without spiraling into a panic that you're frying your brain's ability to sleep.
Keep reading your books. You'll be fine.
So if the color of the light isn't the sleep killer we thought it was, that brings us to the actual rules we set for ourselves when we turn those lights out. This brings us to myth number 2, the golden 8-hour mandate.
Here we go.
The idea that every single adult needs exactly 8 hours of sleep to function optimally.
This is perhaps the most famous sleep rule in existence, and ironically, it's one of the primary drivers of the sleep anxiety we talked about earlier.
Why is it so damaging?
The core frustration here, as Professor Foster points out, is that we've taken a population average 8 hours and arbitrarily declared it to be a strict optimum value for every single human being. Biology simply doesn't operate in absolutes like that.
Right. It ignores the incredible diversity in our genetics, our daily exertion, our underlying health. We don't expect everyone to wear the exact same shoe size just because it's the national average.
That is a great analogy.
So what's the actual reality of our sleep needs?
The reality is that the spectrum of individual variation is enormous. Healthy, perfectly optimal sleep can actually range anywhere from slightly under 6 hours all the way up to 10 or 11 hours a night, depending entirely on the individual's unique biological makeup.
That's a massive window, less than 6 to up to 11 hours. So instead of staring at the clock and doing that terrifying sleep math to hit an arbitrary number, there are much better practical behavior-based tests you can use to gauge if you actually got enough sleep for your specific body.
We need to rely on practical signals. The first one to look at is how you wake up.
Yeah.
Did you wake up relatively naturally in the morning, or did a blaring alarm have to violently drag you out of deep sleep? Generally speaking, if your eyes open naturally around the time you need to get up, your body has had a reasonable amount of rest.
Another great metric is caffeine. Do you immediately need caffeine to function? Did it take you a painfully long time to shake off the grogginess? And were you desperately reaching for coffee just to become somewhat alert and conversational?
If the answer is yes, that's a strong biological signal you fell short.
And then there's my personal favorite behavioral test. Are you acting unempathetic, irritable, or doing thoughtless things?
The grumpy test.
The grumpy test. If you find yourself snapping at colleagues or being incredibly annoying to the people around you, it might actually just be because you didn't get your personal quota of sleep the night before.
It acts as a fantastic behavioral barometer. If you're functioning well during the day, maintaining kindness, and feeling mentally alert, you almost certainly got enough sleep, regardless of whether that total number was 6 hours or 9 hours.
Speaking of rigid rules, here is myth number 3. The idea that you absolutely must wake up at the exact same time every single day, no matter what.
This one is slightly more nuanced because it isn't entirely a myth. Routine is generally very beneficial. Eating your meals at the same time, getting your morning light exposure at the same time, and waking up at the same time.
They act as anchors.
They do. They act as anchors to stabilize your circadian system.
But we take it too far.
We do. You don't need to be obsessively strict about it. Sleep is a highly dynamic, adaptable process.
So if there's a special occasion where you go out to a party, stay up late having a great time, and sleep in the next morning to recover, that is perfectly fine.
Yes, you haven't permanently broken your biology. Your body knows how to compensate.
And what's really fascinating is that our ideal wake-up times actually shift naturally on their own over our lifespans. It's not a static target.
They shift dramatically. It's incredibly common for teenagers, purely due to changes in their biology during puberty, to shift heavily toward an evening chronotype.
Which is exactly why teenagers struggle so intensely to wake up early for school. Their internal clock has literally shifted backward, demanding they stay up later and sleep in later.
But as we age, we slowly revert back to a morning chronotype. By the time we reach our late 50s or early 60s, our sleep timing very closely resembles what it was when we were 10 years old.
The 60-year-old and the 10-year-old are operating on the exact same biological schedule. That's incredible. All right, let's pivot to myth number 7, which dives into a massive biohacking trend. The idea that polyphasic sleep is the ultimate hack for supercharging your productivity.
Polyphasic sleep. The biohacking and tech communities love to experiment with this one.
It had a huge surge in popularity about 10 years ago, and always seems to make a resurgence among people trying to squeeze more hours out of the day.
Hmm.
For those who haven't fallen down this particular internet rabbit hole, polyphasic sleep is the concept that instead of sleeping in one continuous chunk at night, you intentionally fragment your sleep.
You chop it up.
Right. You sleep in multiple short blocks throughout the day, maybe 4 hours at night and then a couple of 20-minute naps, or breaking it into multiple 2-hour chunks.
Feels terrible.
The goal is to reduce your total sleep time to maybe 4 to 6 hours, supposedly leaving you with way more waking hours to be intensely productive.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of how human biology actually functions, we can completely dismantle this idea. The scientific data suggests this is a remarkably bad strategy for cognitive health.
It just doesn't work.
In theory, yes, you mathematically possess more waking hours. But sleep isn't just a volume game. It's about architecture. When you chop your sleep into tiny blocks, your brain never gets the chance to properly cycle through the essential deep sleep and REM phases required for memory consolidation and cellular repair.
So the quality of the work you can actually produce during those extra waking hours drops drastically.
Drastically, because you're essentially functioning in a state of chronic exhaustion.
Right.
You're exhausted, which makes your brain significantly slower, far less productive, and completely strips away your creative problem-solving abilities.
And there are hard numbers backing this up in competitive environments. Studies have shown that students who attempt to study on a polyphasic sleep schedule perform significantly worse on their exams compared to students who just sleep normally in one continuous chunk.
Splitting your sleep into fragmented blocks doesn't turn you into a superhuman productivity machine. It just turns you into a tired, underperforming one.
So take note, life hackers. You can't cheat the system. Okay, let's move into our final section, which is all about the modern traps we fall into when we try to optimize our rest using tech and supplements. Myth number 5. Sleep apps guarantee better sleep.
This is a big one.
I think so many of us can relate to the anxiety these devices cause. Ali shared a perfect anecdote from the source material about this. He was fully bought into the tracking lifestyle. He wore the Oura ring. He slept on the 8-sleep mattress. And he described waking up one morning actually feeling pretty reasonable, feeling physically fine and ready for the day.
Until he made the mistake of looking at his phone.
Exactly that. He checks his app and sees a glowing red 54% sleep readiness score.
Oh, no.
And suddenly, his entire psychological perspective shifts. He looks at that number and thinks, oh, I guess I'm actually not feeling reasonable. I guess I'm supposed to be having a terrible low-energy day today.
He talked himself into it.
He ends up essentially giving himself a nocebo effect. For those unfamiliar, a nocebo effect is basically the evil twin of the placebo effect, where expecting a negative outcome actually creates that negative outcome. He artificially created a bad day for himself just because an app told him he slept poorly.
It's the ultimate modern irony of the wellness space. We use expensive technology to try and perfect our sleep, and the technology itself generates the exact anxiety that ruins our day.
So true.
But here's the hard truth we need to accept about these sleep trackers. Absolutely no consumer sleep apps are FDA approved. None of them are officially endorsed by major sleep federations as diagnostic tools.
That's a massive reality check, considering how many of us treat those morning readiness scores like gospel truth.
We treat them with a reverence they haven't earned. When you actually dig into the scientific papers used to validate many of these proprietary algorithms, you often find incredibly tiny, completely unrepresentative sample sizes.
Like how tiny?
We're talking about an algorithm being validated on a group of, say, 8 college undergraduates living in California.
8 undergraduates.
8.
And then that exact same mathematical formula is rolled out and applied to a 60-year-old executive in London or a 30-year-old nurse working shifts in Tokyo.
Which makes no sense. We just established earlier that sleep needs and natural rhythms change drastically between different individuals and across our own lifespans. So the underlying assumption that one single rigid algorithm can definitively tell all of us what constitutes good sleep is scientifically absurd.
So we shouldn't trust them.
If you're someone who loves looking at data and tracking trends, that's fine, but you have to prioritize your own biological and psychological signals over the algorithm's output. How do you actually feel when you wake up? Are you alert during the afternoon? Those internal signals are infinitely more accurate than an arbitrary readiness score on your phone screen.
Which brings us perfectly to our final myth, number 6.
Mm.
The idea that melatonin is a magic bullet for sleep. This is an incredibly popular mindset in the US, where it's sold over the counter.
It's everywhere.
People pop it like candy for everyday sleep issues, genuinely thinking it's a powerful sedative that will instantly knock them out.
This raises an important question regarding what the scientific data actually says versus what the supplement marketing promises. Because the reality of melatonin's effectiveness is far less magical than people are led to believe.
Let's start by looking at the absolute best-case scenario to see what it can do under perfect conditions.
According to Professor Foster, the most successful study ever undertaken regarding melatonin's efficacy was conducted back in 2007. It focused specifically on autistic children who were given regular, carefully timed small doses every single day for a period of 3 months.
Okay, so highly controlled.
Very controlled. In that highly specific best-case scenario study, melatonin successfully reduced the time it took them to fall asleep by 30 minutes.
30 minutes. That's the absolute peak performance of melatonin recorded in the best study ever done. But obviously, most people taking it aren't in that specific demographic. What about the average person just trying to fall asleep on a Tuesday?
To understand the impact on the average person, we have to look at a broader meta-analysis from 2013. A meta-analysis is essentially a mega-study that aggregates the data from numerous different independent studies to find the true, overarching average effect across a massive pool of people.
So a much clearer picture of reality.
Exactly. When researchers looked at the aggregate data, they found that on average, taking a melatonin supplement reduces the time it takes the average adult to fall asleep by a grand total of about 7 minutes.
7 minutes.
7 minutes.
So what does this all mean?
It means that while melatonin might have some highly specific targeted uses, like helping your body's clock adjust to severe jet lag when you're crossing multiple time zones, it is largely unimpressive and largely ineffective as an everyday magic bullet sleep aid to cure your day-to-day insomnia.
Shaving 7 minutes off your tossing and turning just isn't worth the hype or the money.
Not at all.
So as we pull all of these threads together, a very clear, overarching theme emerges from everything Professor Foster shared in the source material. Our modern, highly commercialized obsession with tracking every single minute of rest, supplementing with pills we don't actually need, and aggressively trying to structure our sleep into rigid 8-hour blocks is often the very thing destroying our natural ability to rest.
It's doing more harm than good.
True sleep hygiene isn't about perfectly optimizing an algorithm or biohacking your schedule. It's about fundamentally listening to your individual biology. Respect your natural chronotype. Pay attention to your mood and energy levels, and stop stressing over statistical averages that don't apply to your unique body.
We really need to strip away the anxiety and return to trusting ourselves and our own biological signals. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, lingering question to mull over based on the science we've discussed today.
Lay it on us.
If we know as a scientific fact that our internal biological clocks naturally shift so dramatically over our lifespan, literally making teenagers nocturnal and turning 60-year-olds into early birds, why does our society stubbornly force every single age group to adhere to the exact same rigid 9-to-5 schedule?
That is a brilliant question to end on. It really makes you rethink how we structure our entire world, from schools to corporate offices. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take a deep breath. Trust your body and rest easy tonight, entirely guilt-free. We'll catch you next time.